The Boneyard, Short Fictions of the Morbid and Macabre, written by Jonathan Dunne, narrated for you by the author. Winging it. It started a month ago. At first, it was just some nagging irritation between my shoulder blades, that spot that's just impossible to get at. I wrote it off to dry skin or perhaps a heat rash or some kind of allergy. I went to the doctor. He barely looked at me before writing a prescription for antihistamines. "Stress," he said. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But deep down I knew this wasn't stress. This was something else. Doctors give that stress diagnosis when they don't have a clue what they're dealing with, and many of them don't. They're just winging it. Nevertheless, I took the medication, but the itch didn't go away. The opposite, in fact. It began to burn. It deepened and festered, and by the end of the week my back was red raw, and it felt like something was clawing its way out from beneath my skin. I woke in the middle of the night to find that my sheets were streaked with blood. But I was also finding black flecks on my bed sheets in the morning. I couldn't place what it was. All I can say is that it was like dandruff, but black. The only place where I could find any degree of relief was in the shower, where the sprinkling hot water from the shower head soothed that unreachable spot between my clavicles. The water ran pink with the blood seeping from the wound, but the brief relief was exquisite. But no amount of scrubbing made me feel clean. But everything changed on the second week. That was when it appeared. I was lying in bed one night, staring at the wall because it was too painful to lie on my back to stare at the ceiling. Too exhausted and in pain to sleep or even move. My back stung, and that unsatiable itch never let up. I resorted to using a back scratcher to reach the source of misery, but that wasn't enough. I needed those plastic fingers to dig deeper into my flesh to get at the burning itch. So I cut the tips of the fingers so the jagged plastic would get more bite on the hunger beneath my skin. I only ended up opening the wound. It was pain and pleasure at the same time. It was while I was contorting myself in my bed to get at my back when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. A deliberate tapping on the bedroom window. Much too precise to be the age-old excuse of a swaying tree branch knocking on the window in the wind. There is no tree outside my window for starters. I'm on the 4th floor of a city centre apartment block. My blood ran cold, and that brought on a numbness. I turned my head, heart pounding, to look at the window. There, as clear as day, was the black silhouette of a crow on my curtain. I've seen this before, especially with magpies, how they come beak-tapping around windows and guttering for spiders and other insects living in tight corners and crevices. But this was different. That crow tapped 3 distinct times, and now it was doing it again. And I could see a distorted view of the avian's silhouette as it tapped out another 3 taps, as gauged as Morse code. Fascinating, yes, but I craved sleep. I sat up slowly in bed, grabbed a book from my nightstand and hurled it at the window. But the silhouette didn't move, not even a flinch. "Piss off!" I cried out. But I was only talking to the walls and possibly my sleeping neighbours. The walls are paper thin in this new building. And getting myself too worked up, to a symphony of pain down my back, I climbed out of bed, crossed the room and peered through my curtains to see the crow, black as night, glistening beady eyes taking me in through the slit in the curtains. It was a freezing night, and little clouds of warm breath wafted through the crow's nostrils above its beak. The bird stared at me. I suddenly pulled open the curtains, expecting the crow to flap away, but it perched defiantly on the windowsill. An odd sensation came over me. There was something in its gaze that was too knowing, too bright, as if it had picked my windowsill out of the other 50. Then it opened its beak, and the sound that came out wasn't a caw, but more of a gurgled and crowed single word. Soul. I saw its black pointed tongue protruding up and down as it spoke. It had said soon, I'm sure of it. I quickly convinced myself that it was a hallucination, a trick of the mind. I'd only imagined that sound as a word because that's how my brain processed it. The bird clearly had a problem with his throat or voice box. These possibilities were one of the many possibilities I told myself over the following nights, when the same crow would come to my window and come tap, tap, tapping, and always 3 times. By the 3rd week, my body began to change. The wound wasn't itching anymore, but now my spine ached, a grinding, twisting, stabbing like I had glass instead of gelatinous discs between my vertebrae. My arms grew weaker, the bones feeling hollow and fragile. My fingers thinned into long and spindly digits, unnaturally sharp at the tips. My fingernails fell off, and black claws took their place. And then came the black tips from the pores of my skin. At first I thought it was that peculiar black dandruff I have been finding in my bedclothes. But to my horror, those tiny black dots became feather tips. My neck had the thickest concentration of them, but as the hours went by, I noticed my entire body darkening with these black dots coming from every pore. As the feathers grew from me, I pulled them. The pain was excruciating and nothing like pulling out hair, leaving tiny, open and bleeding wounds. But there were too many of them. Every time I plucked a feather, a new one would grow in its place, 10 times faster, darker, and thicker. At the beginning, I was able to cover my neck feathers by wearing my polo neck sweater and as many clothes as I could to camouflage my flourishing plumage. But I soon stopped going to work when I noticed the shape of my mouth and nose was altering. That area of my face was beginning to look like one of those Venetian plague doctor masks, and I had a pair of them perched on my wall in my living room by the window, a welcome reminder of my Venice holiday. It was all happening very fast, my body morph. My apartment became my prison, and the crow my jailer. It came every night, perched on my windowsill. Sometimes it tapped on the glass, sometimes it just sat there, still and silent, as though savouring my suffering, its blinking eyes watching my progress. The crow, only this was no ordinary crow, whispered the same "Soul" every night in crow tongue. I didn't answer the door when friends and family came around. I ordered food online from the local supermarket and told the delivery guy to drop the bags outside my apartment door, please, while I waited and peered through the fisheye lens. Once he was gone, I quietly opened my door, quickly grabbed my bags and slinked back inside. If only that poor delivery guy knew the avian monstrosity spying on him from the other side of the door. And that was when I stopped answering calls completely, and took the mirrors down off the walls and shoved them to the back of my wardrobe. The outside world became distant and irrelevant. My windowsill and the night caller became my world, and I needed answers. 2 nights later, as I sat hunched in the dark on my bed, the crow landed on my bedroom window and tapped 3 times before speaking in avian tongues. "Accept," it crowed. The blackbird of night uttered the same warbled word twice more. "Accept! Accept!" "Accept what?" Then cawed at me like any other crow. The crow cocked its head, deliberate motions that were unnerving. Then it cawed at me like any other crow. It cocked its head, deliberate motions that were unnerving. I recoiled, my oily black plumage trembling. "What do you want from me? What have you done?" I rasped in a guttural croak. My voice was hoarse, broken, barely human. It was a last vestige of me, but now that was leaving too. I cried into my feathers, and I watched with morbid fascination as those warm, salty tears rolled off my plumage like water off a duck's back. If only I could take all of this like water off a duck's back, as the old adage goes. The room spun. My stomach twisted into knots. "No," I whispered, shaking. "Leave me alone. Go away. This is all just a bad dream. A nightmare." The crow spread its wings, a gesture of triumphant mockery. I tried to scream, but the sound that came out was a harsh caw. My hands clawed at my throat, but they weren't hands anymore, but wings, and talons clad at my feathered throat, not nails. My mouth, dear Jesus in heaven, my mouth and nose had fused into one to become a 1-foot-long beak. What skin left visible on my legs had roughened and calloused, just like the legs of a crow. I had become a fully fledged crow, a trapped bird in a cage. Tap, 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 trapped. Tap, 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 trapped. Tap, 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 trapped. Tap, tap, tap. And then I understood, by some strange osmosis, a peculiar avian understanding taking place between my brother and I. The crow outside my bedroom window was telling me something through the morse of his tap-tap-tapping on the outside glass. I too began tapping on the glass from the inside with my enormous beak. Us crows tapped and tapped again until the bedroom window cracked. My brother stood back and considered me with his beady eyes, and that was when I caught 1,000 glimpses of my crow self staring back at me in the cracked window pane, big, black, beautiful eyes looking back at me. Delivering one almighty beak strike, I smashed the glass and sent deathly shards onto the street below. But I wasn't concerned with innocent passers-by, but the bright ethereal moon hanging high in the night sky. My brother glanced over his right wing and dropped out of view, before appearing again, silhouetted against that high disco ball in the heavens. I stood onto the window ledge, looking down at how my claws and black stick legs clicked on the concrete. I edged out, glimpsed over my left wing at everything I was leaving behind, and fell from the 4th floor to the 3rd, 2nd, and it was only as I passed from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor that I remembered my wings, and I flapped and rose to a skitter of electric nerves. I flapped my immense 6-foot wingspan. Up and up I soared until I joined my brother by the light of the moon, where we flapped the night fantastic across the city rooftops.